In our lives, we face these inflection points, moments where we get to decide to ourselves, what am I going to choose? What decision am I going to make? And today's episode is inspired by Twyla Tharp, the famous choreographer and dancer who wrote the book Creative Habit. She says, after so many years, I've learned that being creative is a full-time job with its own daily patterns. That's why writers, for example, like to establish routines for themselves. The most productive ones get started early in the morning when the world is quiet. So what does this mean as a creative? I think that oftentimes in our lives, we think that creativity is this innate ability to just get creative work, to be able to do creative work in its purest form. But I'd like to propose to you that some of the greatest minds in history, Ansel Adams, Mozart, needed strict discipline in order to move forward in life. And Twyla says creativity is not just for artists, it's for business people looking for a new way to close a sale, it's for engineers trying to solve a problem, it's for parents who want their children to see the world in more than one way. So I figured rather than tell you about the book that I read, I figured I'd actually take the time to experiment and do what the book is suggesting, which is like a new thing that I'm doing. And so here's what I did. I started waking up early in the morning. I started drinking coffee in order to cope with the fact that I was waking up early in the morning. Not to brag, but I already drank a lot of coffee every morning, but I just upped my coffee intake. Started developing a movement habit because Twyla says that movement is really necessary and important. Shout out to my husband, who has been so supportive and going with me to exercise and encouraging me the entire time. It had me thinking, though, in a deeper way, what my creative DNA is. You see, in the book, she talks all about examples like Ansel Adams and how he inspired the US landscape, and how the way that we do art has a lot to do with how we think and how we navigate the world. And so I'm still trying to figure out what my creative DNA is. A part of me believes that it's interaction, how we interact with our things, how we interact as people on this planet. And I think that the book does require a deeper level of introspection. When I read Dallas Willard's Renovation of the Heart, talking about Christian spirituality and the gospel, a lot of what I've learned is that this was a book that I sat with and that I meditated with for a really long time. And I've learned that Creative Habit, in a similar way, is like that. It requires a deeper level of insight and thought to develop what it is that's true to you in your creative ritual. And if creativity is a skill and a full-time job, as she says, it requires a deeper level of intention to keep doing it and to keep getting started. I'm currently on day 5 of the Creative Habit, and it's been a little bit of a struggle to develop what's true to my DNA when it comes to creativity. I found that waking up early in the morning and having the discipline to do what you say you're going to do in an ideal world doesn't always add up in reality. What I mean by that is I made it my intention to start waking up at 5:30, 6 p.m., but what I've discovered is that strictness and pre-planning is necessary in those moments when you want to be disciplined. And so what I would suggest in order to create a creative habit, just from my early days of starting it, is having a plan in your week. I really do believe that how Twyla has earned her career from 1962 to 2025 and continuing to be ongoing is she is unabashed about having the discipline of going to the gym every day early in the morning. And that takes being able to plan the night before in order to have enough rest and sleep to make it to 80 years of choreographing and making dances. I personally want to get really good at editing videos, building workshops, facilitating a creative practice that is both sustainable, healthy, and fun. And for me, I found it a really big struggle because it does take days of insight. I thought that after 5 days, things would just come naturally and things would just be easy. Sure, I could develop a habit of waking up early in the morning, but habits are only sustainable if I know exactly where it is I want to take myself and where I want to go. I think that what I've learned from reading Twyla's book is she knew she wanted to do modern dance and be really good in that regard. And I'm still trying to develop my style in that way. So giving myself permission to figure out how to make the most of the small space, studio space that I do have is extremely important. Being kind to myself, having a movement practice, I've learned is necessary. I enjoy playing pickleball, inviting friends into that process. If you watched my last video on how I'm dealing with the political climate in the US, you'll find that inviting people over to my home has been a really great way to de-stress and having a good community of friends around me. And I've found as well that to-do lists really do help. Having a sort of intention in the way that I go about things does require using a planner, using a calendar. That's not something I personally like to hear because discipline doesn't come naturally to me. I love fun, but in order to reach my level of flexibility in my career and have the clientele, I do require a new level of focus. It's just, it's difficult having a clear vision constantly of where you want to go and why you're continuing to develop that habit. But in conjunction with reading The Creative Habit, I'm also reading Twyla's book, Keep It Moving, where she talks about the difference between a pledge and a goal. A goal is something that you set for yourself that you'll eventually reach, but a pledge is something that is innate to your character, something you will never stop being or doing throughout time. And for Twyla Tharp, she is someone that has pledged to never stop dancing and to constantly make dancing her calling. And in a similar way, I want to be able to steward that gift in a way that helps service people. It does require these necessary sacrifices because it is a skill and a full-time job. Anyways, so what's even my point? The point is this. When I read through Twyla's Creative Habit, what I thought I was getting was a step-by-step instruction as to how to be a successful creative. What I didn't realize was that I was getting a first-class mastermind on how to become a meaningful creative. And so a couple things that I'm intending to work on as I'm navigating through the first 5 days of my creative practice is, number one, develop an identity as to who I want to become. Number two, try to evaluate what it takes to get to a point where I am that creative. And number three, have a strong consistency in what I do. I've noticed that waking up early has been consistent, but my nightly routine has not, nor has my physical stamina in my movement practice. So being able to do that, and I will give you a play-by-play as to how I'm doing in the future. But this is just part one of the Creative Habit series. I'm continuing to post a series of episodes continuously, but if you want to keep up with my journey, I'm currently restructuring the Sincere Practice newsletter. If you're interested in that, click the link down below. You probably won't get an email from me as regularly because I'm trying to figure out how to make it meaningful for you. But thank you for following me on this journey, and I hope to see you next week. Those are all my updates. Talk soon. Bye, y'all.